Hello, everyone. Welcome to A New Direction. My name's Jay Izzo, and oh man, do we have another great show for you? Oh my gosh, it's a great show. I'm so excited about this book. This book brought many memories back for me, and was just a great refresher course for me personally. But the more that my author Bill Shander, who wrote this book, Stakeholder Whispering, wrote, I was like going, man. You know, I took these classes in college and grad school, but these are principles for helping people that we all should have. This shouldn't be stuck in a psychology class or a grad class. This is a class that we all need to take in helping others discover what they don't even know. And maybe they do, but they need to have it more clarified. Or maybe they've got their needs and their wants confused and they're not sure what the difference is. And how do we go about doing that? And so today, Bill Shander joins me with his book called Stakeholder Whispering. And I know you go, whispering, what do you mean? Okay, secondary title, take a listen to this. Uncover what people need before doing what they ask. Yeah. You know, here's the thing. We don't know what we need. I don't. I think I do, but I don't. And I have coaches who have to ask me questions to pull out of me the things that I don't even know that are there because I don't know. And I want to just relay a quick story before I talk to Bill. Here's the story. I have a client. This just happened this week. So awesome. And we're working on this major project together. We've been working on it for 2 years plus. And there's a lot of technology and there's some legal ramifications that are involved. And so we've got some constraints but there's this technology piece that we really need to get put together. And he calls the technology company and he says, look, this is what I want to do. And the technology people go, well, what do you want it to look like? And he goes, I don't know. I just need you to design it. And then when I see it, I'll know it. But I don't know what it's really supposed to look like, right? And how many of us are in that situation where we go, I'll know it when I see it, but I don't know what it is. And you know, they missed an opportunity because we didn't hire them. And the reason we didn't hire them is because, you know what, they just needed to ask us some questions to get us more clarification because we're not even sure what it should all look like. We know what the pieces are, but we don't know what the technology is and the stuff is that go together to make that happen and what the scheme of the whole thing. And we didn't know, and we didn't hire them simply because if they'd have just asked us questions where we could get more clarity on that, instead they go, well, if you don't know what you want it to look like, we can't help you. Wow. And I went back and I go, you missed an opportunity. This is the beauty about Bill Shander's book. Because he can help you get there. Because if you're one of those people who are out there go, you know, I can't help people create a vision. Wrong, you can. Wrong, you can. That's what I pull out of Bill Shander's book. It's not persuasion. It's not manipulation. It's literally pulling out of us what's in there that we don't even know. And that's the beauty of the book. So I am excited about having him on. I've been asking, I've even, before we went on the show today, I said, read something again, because I go through the book twice, right? I read the book and I go through it again, take notes. And I asked him a question. Bill comes back to give me clarification. I'm like, oh, yeah, there it is. Because it's helping me too. So let me introduce you to Bill Shander. Bill Shander is an author, educator, and information designer, helping clients turn their data into compelling visual and often interactive experiences. He teaches data storytelling, information design, and data visualization on LinkedIn Learning. 2 million plus learners reached, by the way. And he also does workshops all over the world. He's a keynote speaker, has lectured for graduate and undergraduate students and staff at Harvard, Northeastern, Stanford, more. This is his first and great book, Stakeholder Whispering, which is published by Wiley early this year. So please welcome to the show, everyone, and welcome for the first time to A New Direction, Bill Shander. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very, very much for having me, Jay. And that was a fantastic introduction. I love the story, by the way, which, if If we have a moment, I would love to comment on it, but I don't want to get you off
Well,
track from where you
I
want
would
to
be
take
happy
this.
go, please comment on it. I would love to hear your comments on the story. Let's start there. I
So
think that's the
yeah,
conversation.
I mean, it's a fascinating story for a whole bunch of reasons, and not least for me personally, because my background before I started doing data storytelling and visualization, more broadly, I did web design and development. So literally, kind of what you just described. People have need some technology stuff implemented, and we got to make an interface for it, and then also implement the technology. And boy, that response from that company you talked to is 100% the wrong response. Obviously, of course, thank God you didn't hire them. But on top of that, the reason I wrote this book is because in 30 years doing design, designers experience what I'm describing all the time. Design clients don't know what they need. So they say, hey, you make the button blue on the website. Or in your case, yeah, we don't know what it should be. You tell us. And so designers experience this constantly. Our clients don't know what they need. They ask us for specific things, but it's not, they don't really need a blue button on the website. What they need is a button that's noticeable and clickable. Ah, that's the actual need, not a blue button. Okay. Now, the solution may be a blue button, fine, but the need is more or different than that. And so I loved it that that's the story that you told, because that world of design is where I experienced this, and most designers talk about this idea that our clients don't really know what they need, and we need to sort of get it out of them. But in the rest of the world, to your point, like it's not just for design; it's for everybody in every knowledge working role. No one knows what they need, as you said, and so our job as good workers or just good people in the society is to yes help them figure out what they need, and then we can help them get there.
Well, I want to start with something that you said in the preface of this book. You said we can't, let me say it the way you said it. You kind of can't convince anyone of anything, but you can help them convince themselves. And that's what this book is really about.
Yeah.
This book is about the art of conversation you can have with your stakeholders to help them figure out what they really need. I want to go back to the first part, though. We can't convince anyone of anything. That is so true. And yet, I think because I do work with a lot of people in the sales world as a coach, I think there's this belief that somehow we can
Yeah.
help us understand more deeply that we really can't convince anybody of anything.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, I think that people are resistant to change generally, right?
Yeah,
And we're especially resistant to change when you're asking me to change my identity, who I am. It's one of the hardest things you could ever ask somebody to do. That's why there's such, tribalism around politics and all kinds of other things in our world these days. So rather than trying to convince me that your ideas are better than mine or whatever the scenario, if you just help enlighten me, I will convince myself. And so you mentioned in the introduction that this isn't about persuasion, manipulation, et cetera, but there is a lot of information from persuasion, science, and psychology, not trying to manipulate people, but to understand what are the kinds of things that allow people to see things in a new way.
mm,
And so, yeah, I'm not going to convince you that what I'm saying is better than what you're saying, but I can hopefully maybe provide information that allows you to see it if it's true. And by the way, it may not always be true. And that's why the stakeholder whispering, it is about asking questions and getting them to really dig into themselves to figure out what they need because you don't know. Like you don't know either, right? That
right.
technology company could back and it could have come back to you and said, "Oh, you don't know what it should look like? Well, we think it should be green and it should be very wide horizontally and very narrow vertically, and it should have purple buttons." Okay, is that the right thing? I don't know, maybe, but you didn't know. They certainly didn't know, and so a good conversation, as you said, good questions could have gotten you to a real useful answer.
Yeah, it really could have. And he was really frustrated. And I'm his coach, so he calls me on the phone with all his frustration. And of course, I'm reading this book, and I'm like going, well, this is largely a problem with a lot of times with, and I don't want to just throw technology companies on the bus, but some technology companies under the bus that they're great at the technology, but they're not great necessarily at the vision part of it because they're not helping the people because you don't even know what the vision really is. And so, and you can't get to that, what that should look like in terms of, how you want people to we know how people want to interact with it, how we would like them to, but we don't know what it should look like.
Yeah,
And I think all they had to do was just start asking some questions. And one of the things you talk about here is in this is that if we're going to be a stakeholder whisperer, and maybe that's where we should start before I get into the next piece. When you say the word stakeholder whispering and people hear that, what are you really saying? So that we can have a common frame of reference of stakeholder whispering.
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I think there's two words in the title, and let's define both words. First is stakeholder. And the official definition of stakeholder, and this comes from the guy who invented the idea of stakeholder management, is someone who can affect or is affected by whatever it is you're working on.
Hmm.
So can affect it. Your boss can affect the work that you do, people like that, clients, etc. Or can be affected by. And so a lot of times we use the word stakeholder to mean like, the public who's going to come to town hall to scream at you if you're like PR for a mining company trying to build a mine in people's backyards, right? Those are both stakeholders. And so stakeholder whispering is about whispering with those people. Okay, so let's talk about whispering. The Horse Whisperer, very famous, book and then a movie. The idea was that there was this guy back in like I think the 18th century originally, who could go into a barn with a wild horse and just whisper in his ear, and then the horse would come out completely calm and tame, and you could ride it and whatever else. So rather than whipping the horse and beating it and breaking it in the traditional way, it was some magical conversation happening. Now, what's interesting is that we just talked about this a second ago. Like, it's not about influence and persuasion and manipulation, although horse whispering kind of was. But in stakeholder whispering, we're talking, we're sort of having these magical conversations with our stakeholders in order to elicit what they really need. So that's what whispering is all about. And then, there's other interesting things about the idea of a whisper. One of my favorite ways of thinking about whispering is that, you know, when someone whispers and they speak really quietly, everyone like pauses. And someone responding is probably more likely to whisper right back to them. Like it can change the dynamics of the entire room when someone whispers. There's something very, you know, affecting about a whisper. And so it's a special way of communicating, which is the other reason I love that word.
There was an old commercial. Goes way, way back. Maybe many of my listeners won't even remember this commercial. Probably most won't. But there was a commercial years ago with E.F. Hutton, and there would be this crowd of people talking, 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 and there was these two people having this quiet conversation, and they would go, "And my broker is E.F. Hutton," and then the whole room goes quiet, and they lean in to, if you remember the commercial,
Oh
and
yeah.
right, and they all lean in because when E.F. Hutton talks, people listen, right? And they did it in a very soft tone because there's
Yeah.
some truth about that, right? That we've got all this noise at one level, but a whisper can change, right? The dynamic of the environment, which is
100%.
right, so cool.
Yeah.
What you talk about here, fast thinking and slow thinking, uh, which is Dr. Kahneman's work. And how do we put into perspective Kahneman's ideas of thinking fast, thinking slow as it applies to when we're going to go in to do our own whispering to our stakeholders?
Yeah, it's one of the most important ideas in the whole book. And so for people who didn't read Thinking Fast and Slow, Kahneman won the Nobel Prize for a whole bunch of reasons. But a whole bunch of the research that he's citing in this book, some of it his and some of it others, is that humans essentially communicate in two different ways. System one, they refer to as fast thinking. So I call it just fast thinking throughout the book to simplify things. Fast thinking is the instinctive, intuitive response, right? And so this works really well for a survival mechanism, right? So in other words, you're walking through the forest, you hear some rustling in the grass behind, or in the leaves behind you, you run, right? Because it might be a lion, even though 99% of the time it's a squirrel, right? And there's no reason to be afraid. But your instinctive response, the fast thinking, is run away or you could die. And so your genes get passed on even the 1% of the time that it is actually a lion. So that's all well and good for survival, but that's not so productive and useful in a work environment, right? We don't have to be like living on the edge of our seats quite as much. unless you have a crazy boss. But usually not quite so much. So slow thinking, as Kahneman describes it, is when we slow it down. We don't need to have that instinctive response. It's not about a cortisol response. It's about, well, let me analyze this. Let me really weigh the evidence. Let me reason about these things. Now, it turns out, according to Kahneman and a lot of others, we're actually not very good at reasoning as humans. We think we are. There's actually a really great book called The Enigma of Reason, where these writers did a bunch of research and they discovered that when you are reasoning, or you think you're reasoning, what you're really doing, like you feel smart thoughts going through your head. You're trying to work through a difficult problem. What you're actually doing is justifying in your own mind to yourself the decisions you already made subconsciously. So the reason this is so important to your question is that we are always being driven by our subconscious, always. Even when you think you're reasoning, you are not. You are always being driven by your subconscious. So what does this have to do with whispering? Well, the basic idea is this. Your boss says, hey, we're launching a new product, make a brochure. That's a fast thinking response. We always make brochures, the new products, so I guess we should make a brochure. And of course, you run off and start making a brochure. Or you're in HR and your boss says, give me a report about the HR analytics. Boom, you start running off that report. But that's a fast thinking response. Do you really need a report? Is it about HR analytics broadly, or is it about something narrower than that? Do we need really need a new brochure, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? So if you simply slow it down and at every moment ask, I wonder if that's a fast thinking request or an actually well reasoned, thought through request. Do we really know the underlying need yet? Before you jump in and do it, that's the basis for all of this. Like, resist the fast thinking response and recognize that everything is a fast thinking response for the most part.
As part of this, you talk about, and this is what you say in the book, you say, no one is fully in touch with reality. And then you make a quote from Daniel Boorstin. The great menace to progress is not ignorance, but the illusion of knowledge. Help us bridge that a little bit here, that we're not in touch with reality and it's actually the illusion of knowledge that's inhibiting our progress and not our ignorance.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing, right? The fact is, we're not in touch with reality because reality, well, first of all, what is reality? I mean, we can go really deep on that if we wanted to.
Sure.
But, like, given the example I mentioned before, we have a new product, we need a brochure. Is that reality, or is that just the instinctive, intuitive response, the fast thinking? And so until I investigate it, I don't know what reality is. And so acknowledge that, realize that, yes, we're not in touch with reality at all times. And then, to the second part, can you say the quote again?
The great menace to progress is not ignorance, but the illusion of knowledge. Daniel.
The illusion, yes, the illusion of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
We think we know what reality is. We think every new product needs a new brochure. That's an illusion. It really is. And it's not that it's wrong, by the way. Maybe 99% of the time, the best thing to do when you launch a new product is to get a brochure ready. It's a useful tool sometimes. But it's the illusion of the knowledge that, yes, that is 100% the thing that we must do, always, always, always. It's I'm attached to the subconscious fast thinking response. I don't even investigate it. And that's an illusion. We need to investigate these things in order to do the best work that we can.
His name is Bill Shander. The book is Stakeholder Whispering. Uncover what people need before doing what they ask. Outstanding read. By the way, he's also very clever and funny in this book. So if you think, oh man, Jay, this is just going to be, it's a dry, no. He's actually very funny. He's clever. He does some things in the book that just, that'll make you laugh. And he tells some great stories in the process of the book, and even embarrasses himself. I'm not going to give that one away, but I have to tell you, I laughed so hard. I laughed so hard on his run that, and the way his description of it was absolutely fantastic. Copies available everywhere books are sold, put out by Wiley. You're listening to him here on A New Direction. Hey, folks, I got to talk about my sponsors here because, they pay the bills. Zoundy, Zoundy. Ultimate game changer for authors, publishers, and anybody who's doing anything in the audio space. Listen, I went and spoke at a conference in Salt Lake City. I had Zoundy Count. They put together a specific QR code and link that people could download my audiobook for free. Why would I do that? Well, here's the thing. I get their email addresses and I can interact with them and I can ask them questions. What'd you like? What didn't you like about the book? What could I do differently? How could I write? What would you like me to see right next? Right. And it helps me kind of think through some of the questions that they had and some of the conversations. And it was really, really enlightening. So listen, I got a special code. You just go to Zoundy, ZOUNDY.com/J. Enter my code JAY25. You'll unlock special savings. I'm telling you, it is so well worth it. I really enjoy the interactions with the listeners of my book. It's absolutely fantastic. Zoundy.com/J, JAY25. And Linda Craft Team Realtors, for more than 40 years, they've been helping people transition in life. And you go, they're real estate people. How do they help people transition? Well, in life. And it's like, well, every place you ever lived has been a life transition, hasn't it? They know how to take the stress out of it. They know how to take the worry out of it. They've been helping thousands of people doing it for 40 years. They can help you no matter where you live. Check them out, lindacraft.com, LINDACRAFT.com. And we're back here on A New Direction with Bill Shander, his book, Stakeholder Whispering. Uncover what people need before doing what they ask. Great read. I really enjoyed it. Fun read, for sure. In chapter 3, you have everything is UX, right? User experience. Help the people who are viewing and listening what you mean by everything is UX.
I'd love to. And actually, can I ask you a question?
Sure, I would love to.
When you read that, were you like, oh yeah, I totally understand that, I agree, or was it like that was like a new term and not something that was in your day-to-day world?
No, matter of fact, I just did a talk on everything is CX, customer experience. And so I just had done it. And because we have a tendency, I was talking to salespeople, we have a tendency to look at customer service. Well, customer service comes after you make the sale. And so customer service doesn't come before you make the sale. It's the customer experience that happens before the sale. Well, if I've got enough empathy to really put myself in another person's shoes to understand the customer experience, or in this case, the user experience, then I have to have a different mindset that I have to take in order to make that happen. And I'm trying to get salespeople to have that same mindset to go, all right, what's the customer experience? What's the user experience? Whether it's the website that we have or whatever it may be, can I put myself in their shoes and really understand the user experience? Did I answer that question appropriately?
You totally did. And it's funny, yeah, customer experience, user experience, there are various terms for this basic idea, and it's what you just described, right? You need empathy. You need to understand who's the end user of this thing and what do they actually need in order to then design an experience that's going to be useful, helpful, maybe if you're lucky, wonderful, delightful, etc. And I think that when people, especially a lot of people who aren't sort of exposed to this basic idea on creating an experience, if you're in IT, you don't think of yourself as an experience creator a lot of the time. But if you think about the person on the other end of whatever it is that you're doing, that they're going to have an experience of this thing that you're creating, it forces you to take that position of empathy as you described, and it just changes your perspective on everything that you do, whether it's in sales as you're talking about, or in designing technological experiences, or in literally anything else. And so everything is an experience, and when you orient yourself that way, you're going to just change how you approach everything, and you realize that it's all about that person's need. Your boss may have said, hey, do X, but is my boss the key stakeholder here, or is the user of this thing I'm creating, the customer for this thing, the real stakeholder? And so that's who I need to be focusing on. It doesn't mean my boss is a jerk, I can avoid them or whatever and ignore them, but they're maybe a secondary stakeholder, or maybe they're tied with this person. I don't know, depending on the circumstances, but I really got to be focused on the experience I'm creating for that person over there, primarily, probably.
Mm. There's a statement in this chapter that you make towards the end of the chapter I want to discuss a little bit with you. And that is that when you ask customers to tell them what they want, that's not an answer. So here's how you phrase it. Businesses generally understand that asking customers to tell them what to do isn't the answer. When you say that, what is that? What are you really trying to get at there that would be helpful to people listening?
I mean, I think the most famous example everybody's heard is that, Henry Ford famously I'll say he said it, although, as I say in the book, he actually didn't ever say this, but let's pretend he did. That he famously said that if he had asked his customers what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. And that's probably true, even though he officially didn't actually say it. But like when you ask your customers what do they want, they will say faster horses if it's 1915 or whenever it was, and therefore you never end up getting the car, right? People don't know what they need. What they can sometimes articulate is what they wish what they have now, how it might be better. And so it's hard for them to envision this other way of seeing things. So, our job is to really help them articulate it to themselves and then eventually articulate it to us so we can execute on that for them.
Well, yeah, I don't know if he really did say. I don't. There seems to be evidence to suggest that he didn't say it. It came from somewhere, that's for sure. But
Yeah.
who did say something similar though was Steve Jobs, basically.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
Steve Jobs basically, had a quote that was, I mean, there's the success of the iPhone and all the iProducts is a result of Steve Jobs, not Jones, Steve Jobs saying, listen, I didn't ask people. I just, I,
Yeah.
I did it because this is what I saw in the user experience from what they have currently.
And
And
it
so,
gets back to your story, by the way, because what he said was, if I asked people what they wanted, oh no, sorry. He would have said what he said was something to the effect of, people don't know what they want until I show it to them.
right, right.
And so, like, the people who said to you, like, if you don't know what you want, I can't do it. Well, no, that's the wrong answer. You don't know what you want. Cool. Like, I'll show you a bunch of options, then you'll pick one, right? That's the right answer from a designer. But yeah, sure, that's a verifiable quote. And there's deep, deep, deep wisdom in that quote and in the Ford quote, true or not.
Yeah. This book is divided up into, I think, 5 parts. Is that right? Do I have that right? 5 parts? I
I
think it's
think, yeah, 4 or 5, yeah.
5 parts. 5 parts. And the second part is how ideas. And in chapter 5, which is entitled "You Belong," um, you talk about something called "step into the breach." And this is a personal anecdote from yours. You said nearly every major stepping stone in my skill development happened because I accepted a project that required some yet to be learned capability. This is difficult because we all feel imposter syndrome when we do this on some level. How do you help people step into the breach? Because we have to do it to grow. And yet it seems critically important to becoming a good stakeholder whisperer that we do have to step into the breach. Help us make that transition or help us bridge that gap.
Yeah, I think that one of the most important things is this, that, I don't care where you are in your career. I don't know if you're day one in a new job, like just graduated college, or if you're 20 years in middle management, whatever. Um, the fact is, you're in the seat that you're in for a reason.
Hmm,
Someone hired you because they thought that you would be good at that role.
hmm,
On top of that, your boss, your client, whoever it is who's your stakeholder asking you to do something, they may or not have done your role before they elevated to where they are today.
hmm,
So if they have, then they may know what you do, how you do it. They may be a little bit, more informed. But especially if they haven't, guess what? When they ask you to do X, you may know more than them about X. And by the way, even if they have done it, they may have done it 5, 10, 12 years ago. Things change, right? So you're very qualified to know about what you do. And so it's okay, you should feel it's okay when your boss says do X to say, hey boss, tell me more about X.
hmm.
When you say do X, what do you mean by that? Let's investigate X. And on day one in your career, is it harder to do this? Absolutely. Is it even harder to push back and say, gee, I don't know if X is the right thing, boss? Yes. That's where the whispering comes in. It's the way to do that so that you don't feel the imposter syndrome. You don't feel as much like you're not pushing back, you're not making anybody defensive, but you're having a conversation to really help you figure out, well, what kind of X am I doing?
Hmm.
The nuance so that you do it really, really, really well. But it's my part is hubris. I was like, sure, I'll figure it out. And like, not everybody is as dumb as I am to think that they can always pull that off. Um, but you should remember that you know what, you're there for a reason. So allow yourself some space to have a conversation at a minimum.
My favorite 4 words in life. I'll figure it out. It's my favorite 4 words in life. To my detriment, that is absolutely the truth. Those are my favorite 4 words.
Yeah.
It has helped me more than it hurt me, but it has hurt me sometimes.
I was gonna say it's not 100%, right?
No, it's not 100%. I can promise you that I'll figure it out has not been 100%.
Yeah.
One of the things, there's a subtitle in this chapter. It says, luck favors the prepared. And you say, one important key to success is self confidence. And an important key to self confidence is preparation. Talk about self confidence, preparation, and in terms of what we're going to be doing here in terms of stakeholder whispering.
Yeah, I mean, I think a good anecdote I can share, which is not in the book, although, as you said, there is another running story in the book, but that one we'll leave people to discover for themselves. Uh, I've run a few marathons in my life, one unsuccessfully. I had to stop. But one of the worst experiences I had was a marathon before that. So essentially, I ran two marathons that were very rough. One I didn't finish, one I finished, but it was difficult. Let's just say that. Long story short, at some point, literally 20 years later, I was like, you know what? I'm going to do this thing again. And I knew why I had failed the previous times. Among other things, I didn't prepare well enough. I didn't do the long runs you're supposed to do. I didn't run as frequently as I should have, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So going into that marathon, I was really nervous. I had a monkey on my back because the last time I had tried it, I had failed. And the time before that was barely better. So I prepared, I trained, and I really, really methodically trained and followed the process you're supposed to follow, et cetera. So when it got to the marathon on, literally at the starting line, I was definitely still nervous. I definitely was like, am I going to survive this thing? Am I going to finish it? I feel like I'm in good shape. I don't know, but I had done the preparation. And so that gave me way more confidence than the first time around. The first time around, I think subconsciously, I knew I wasn't quite as prepared. And I was just sort of hoping, oh, I'll figure it out. That's a good example, but that didn't work out so well for me. Well, I did well on this other marathon 20 years later, personal best time. I hit my goal, and that confidence didn't come from nowhere. It came from preparation.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
it's easy to say that when it comes to like a physical activity, oh, just train and you'll do well. But the same thing applies in work, right? Like, I'm learning a new skill. I then have to apply that skill. If you really worked to learn it and practiced it, it's going to work out. So confidence comes from preparation, 100%.
Well, just as an example, just doing this show, I mean, there's a reason why I read every book cover to cover and take notes on it, right? It makes me far more confident to walk in and be able to talk to you. I mean, this is your book, right? I try to get into your mind reading the book, but I can't know
Yeah.
everything about it. But I could be as prepared as I can be, which gives me the confidence to be able to have a reasonable conversation with you and hopefully not look stupid in the process.
Yeah.
But I don't feel that. I feel like I have confidence enough to go, I know what he wrote, right? I think I have it for the most part, not all of it, but I think I have it down pretty good. But I can at least have a conversation with you about it. But it's
Yeah.
the preparation that goes into it's the days of preparation that
And by
go.
the way, I have to say, first of all, when you said you were going to read the book, I was like, that is awesome because not all interviewers do. And it's always a better conversation when someone does. But the other thing is like an interview is the same idea as stakeholder whispering. It's all about asking questions. And yeah, you can't ask good questions if you don't know what the heck you're talking about, right? Good questions come from a basis, right? A
Right.
basis in this thing that you're supposed to be talking about. And either maybe you're already an expert in it and or there's some source material you can ingest on it. But yeah, I mean, this conversation is better because of that preparation, 100%.
Talk about not just bowing to authority, because you talk about that our brain pretty much turns itself off if an expert is involved, and we have to remind ourselves some things. Help us not to just bow to authority because we'll shut down if we hear the word expert, CEO, or whatever, insert C whatever, and then
Yeah.
we should help us not to just bow down to authority here.
And what's interesting is that there's a super interesting research study, which I'll just share with your audience quickly to sort of illustrate the point that you're describing. If you put people in an MRI machine and you literally watch their brain activity going on. And if someone is giving them advice, if it's just a normal person, their brain's lighting up and doing all kinds of usual things. But if the person is identified as an expert before they start giving the person advice, literally their frontal cortex shuts off.
Hmm.
They literally stop thinking for themselves. If we trust expertise that much in certain circumstances. Now, what's interesting is I use that as an example for how you, as the stakeholder whisperer, can influence, essentially have the conversation with your boss to help them, like essentially to allow them to engage with you because you bring expertise to the table, research, arguments for why what you're saying is valid, etc. But to your point, yeah, it works the other way too. So like, yeah, your boss says go jump, you say how high because yeah, you're just like, okay, I guess you're the boss, you're the expert, I better do what you say. And so we know from research that expertise is influential and you're more likely to listen to them. But here's where we come back to Kahneman. All right, even though you're an expert and I trust you and I believe in you, like this isn't about animosity or hostility. I like my bosses, right? My clients. I love my clients, but I'm always going to question what they say. I'm always going to probe it because sometimes, even though they're smart and even though they're experts, sometimes even because they're experts, by the way, because they're so ingrained in what they know, they may be, probably are, being driven by their subconscious.
Hmm.
So you're an expert. I trust you. I respect you. But tell me more, a little bit more about that. Why do you think this?
Hmm.
Because even an expert, especially maybe an expert, is open to thinking and seeing things in a new way.
Hmm.
So probe it.
Yeah, and it goes back to what we talked about earlier, right? We get so much knowledge, it's actually not helping us,
Yeah, that's
right?
true. The more I know, the more likely I think I know what I'm doing, right? And so I'll be blinded by my own, wisdom, we can call it that. But no, I don't. So the
Right.
more we accept and realize that, yeah, none of us know anything, then the faster we'll sort of be able to move past that to, all right, let's figure it out together.
Right. Which is it's I'm laughing because you know what I realize, in this particular part of what I do in my career, reading a book a week, I realize how much I don't know.
Yeah.
Because what I realize is, okay, Bill Shander wrote this book called Stakeholder Whispering, right? And I've learned a lot from this book. And I've learned a lot from every book, right? But then what I recognize is, okay, I just read one book. Do you know how many books were published this past week?
Yeah.
Countless that I don't know. So just because I read this book, yeah, I've gained some knowledge, but there's no way. When I look at the
Seconds.
vast body of it, I have no idea what I'm thinking or knowing. There's no way,
Yeah.
right? It's just, it becomes bigger for me. Every book I read, I just go, there's more out there I just don't know,
Yeah.
which is humbling, because you think, oh, you're gaining all this knowledge. Well, thank you, but you don't understand. I'm actually seeing myself dumber because there's just so much more out there I don't know than I do know. Chapter 6, just asking question. You have questions. You use a quote from Zig Ziglar. It says, "Questions are the answer," and this is the heart of stakeholder whispering is questions. So let's dig into Zig Ziglar's quote, questions are the answer. And because this is where we're going to be headed. This is now the road that we're going to be heading on in terms of being a great stakeholder whisperer.
Yeah. It's funny, Zig Ziglar, famous for sales, right?
Hmm.
Um, and so, there's actually a really good book that I quote in my book called The Challenger Sale,
Hmm.
which is all about how you sell complex products to people. And they're saying the same thing I'm saying. Those people don't know what they're buying. They don't know why they're buying it. They don't know what they really need. So a good salesperson, to your point, has to really understand that experience and dig in and ask a lot of good questions to help them figure out what they actually need. And so, you know, questions are the answer because questions are everything. We don't know anything. We don't know what we need for sure. And so by asking questions, well, let me put it this way. If I'm the stakeholder and you're asking me questions, what am I doing? I have to think in order to answer those questions. And the process of thinking, especially if you do it in a certain way that I describe in the book, you're more likely, because I have to actually articulate it in words, right? I'm more likely to maybe I have like a really well memorized script for how I describe things, but you ask me a new question in a new way, I'm gonna have to come up with a new way of saying it. That is gonna change. My brain is gonna go into a different mode, and I'm gonna be seeing it in a new and different way in order to answer your questions. And this is the magic of the sort of question approach, the Socratic method, in order to do this work. You have to remember that when you're stakeholder whispering, when you're trying to elicit real needs from your stakeholders, you're asking questions not to learn the answers yourself, although that will happen. But your goal when asking those questions is to get them to think differently. It is like therapy. It really is. I mean, you're a coach, right, Jay? It's like coaches ask a lot of questions. You said you use the Rogerian method. You ask questions in order to prompt a person to start talking, and they're going to come at it from all kinds of different directions. And at some point, they're going to be like, "Whoa, hold on! I just said something. It made me realize something. Yeah, I have this new idea. More clarity into what I really need." Back and forth with the questions is magical. You can't replicate it, I don't think, in any other way.
Mm. I think you're absolutely correct. His book, Bill Shander is with us. The book is Stakeholder Whispering. Uncover what people need before doing what they ask. Available everywhere books are sold. Absolutely fantastic. I really enjoyed it. A lot of fun to read, honestly, and you're going to learn a bunch, I promise you. And it's going to help you. I don't care if you're in sales. I don't care if you're a leader. I don't care what leadership level. We're all leaders on some level. I don't care if you're a project manager. We're all project managers. He even says that in the book. We're all project managers. Fact of the matter is there's not a person who's listening or who isn't even listening that could use this book. It's fabulous read. You're listening to him here on A New Direction. Folks, Zoundy, I talk about them every week. I love them. If you're an author or a publisher and you want to increase your audiobook reach, check them out. Listen, I give my book out when I speak at conferences to the whole entire audience, and I get back their email addresses. I'm able to interact with them, and they ask me questions, which I think is so valuable. And they make me think about what it is I might want to write next, or they give me sometimes generate ideas, or maybe can you give me a deeper explanation on this? And I found that interaction so valuable in terms of marketing my book and doing other things. So I have a special code. It's Zoundy, ZOUNDY.com/J. Use J25. That's JAY25. Unlock special savings. Absolutely fantastic. Check them out. Linda Craft Team Realtors. Listen, I'm biased. I'm not even going to deny it. I'm biased. I think it's the best real estate website there is out there. And the reason I say that, yeah, they have all the things that you would find in a real estate website, like listings and all the information that you would want on what house you want to buy, those type of things, and all those things. But here's the thing that I really like is that they have things like, they got a child psychologist to write about moving with children. They got a veterinarian to talk about how to move with your pet. They've got a regular ongoing podcast on real estate right now, talking about real estate matters that matter to you, interviewing people from all different areas related to real estate. It's the information that's not just about the listings that I find so valuable. Check them out, lindacraft.com. It's absolutely fantastic website. I think you'll agree. It's LINDACRAFT.com. And we're back here on A New Direction with my friend Bill Shander. He doesn't know we're friends, but we are friends, whether he likes it or not. So I just confused him. That's called aporia, which is an important concept when we're asking people questions. Correct, Bill? That the aporia, which is a state of puzzlement, that's an important thing that we're trying to get at when asking questions.
That's it. And I sort of described it before, right? The basic idea, Socrates himself, he was Greek, right? And he famously would pepper his students with questions. And he stated it. He said this out loud that his goal was to push them into a state of aporia, puzzlement. So he was literally trying to confuse them. So he would ask them a ton of questions. Hopefully they would get confused. And from that mist, from that confusion, you can rise above and there's an insight. there's that moment where someone will say, "Whoa, hold on, wait, I'm a little confused. Wait, yeah, I never saw it that way before."
Mm,
And then when you hear them say that or something like that, that's when you know they've reached aporia. So
mm,
when you have a stakeholder and they say, do X, and
mm,
you ask them a ton of questions about it and you do it in a certain way, you're not trying to confuse them, but in a way, there will be, if you do it in a certain way, you're going to throw them slightly off balance.
mm,
And that lack of balance, that moment of, whoa, hold on a second, will allow them sometimes to come up with that, oh, wow, there's an insight in here. I didn't even realize this. Yes, this is what I need, not that thing that I asked you to do before. So
mm.
it's a magical moment, Aporia. It's a very important concept.
You said a term in chapter 7 that's going to throw people off, and I think it's going to cause a little aporia. Useful paranoia. Uh, I think if people are going, what? Did he just say useful paranoia? I went, no,
Yeah,
yeah, no, he did. Let's
yeah.
talk about that just for a second because it is an important concept here.
It is. And, it's really my own phrase, my own way of talking about essentially critical thinking, right? If someone says, the sky is blue,
Mm,
you should probably look up and say, yeah, the sky actually is blue today, but is the sky always blue? I don't know. Who said which sky? Are we talking about Earth? Are we talking about on Mars? Are we talking like a critical thinker always asks themselves, is that 100%?
mm,
Is there another way of looking at it? Should I be investigating this? And so, paranoia is like that. Paranoia is like, ooh, everything's wrong. Oh my God, what's happening? But useful paranoia is, not quite losing, your mind over things, but questioning everything. And that's what it's about, right? Because again, if the subconscious is driving everything, if we're literally not in touch with reality, if no one knows what they need,
mm,
then I guess I should be questioning everything.
mm,
That's my job.
mm. I'm going to move us to chapter 9. Can you hear me now? Because this is an important part of our whispering, stakeholder whispering. And according to Julian Treasure, which you quoted here, 60% of communication is listening. And here's the sad fact. The sad fact is, and we only understand about 25% of what we hear. And of course, when I was in college and grad school, we talked about active listening. And matter of fact, we got the Chinese symbol for active listening, which was the ears and the heart and the whole piece of it. It's really quite an interesting diagram of how it's put together. But you have things like focus, being interruption free, attention, nonverbal cues, total meaning. Help us become better listeners, please.
It's probably one of the hardest things to teach because there's a lot of personality involved, right?
Mm,
Maybe you have a little bit of ADHD, or maybe you're just very narcissistic, or all kinds of reasons why you might not be a very good listener. And it's also very normal. I mean, the fact is, we are smart humans. Our brains are constantly doing stuff. So the moment you start talking, I'm thinking about it. I'm processing it. And so it's very hard to literally just listen.
mm,
But I actually had a friend recently sort of phrase it in a way that I think is pretty constructive. He said, listen with your ears, not your brain. So, in other words, as much as you possibly can, turn your reaction engine down and really just listen. Like, hear what they are saying. And it's really hard to do. Like, here you are, you're interviewing somebody, you're listening to my responses, you're going to have a follow-up question, or maybe you're going to move on to the next question. So of course your brain is really going, and you're the host of the show. Like you have a job to do to entertain and inform your audience. So, and when you're talking to a stakeholder, same thing. Like you're taking notes because I got to do this thing my boss is telling me I need to do, but you're also asking questions, and so you just have to do your best. Like I'm going to listen to what they say. I'm gonna jot down a note because they said something that I probably should react to later. I'm going to circle it, but I'm not gonna react right away, and I'm not gonna jump in on what they're saying and immediately start responding to it. And that's what, of course, most of us do most of the time. Someone's talking, and you're already thinking about your response, and then the moment you can actually throw in your response, you're gonna jump in and do it. We just got to resist that and just listen as fully and as well as we can. Yeah, those things you mentioned that I talk about in the book, focus, etc. There's research about this stuff. There's a lot of good articles about it, but If you boil it down to one basic idea, listen, like turn off your reactions as best you can and pause and give people a moment, even when there is that break, that moment where you can jump back and start saying stuff, rest a beat because they may have more to say, and you may be still processing before you need to say what you need to say. And more questions are generally better than more answers talking on your part, anyways.
This is really this is so fundamentally important because we're not good listeners. We think we're good listeners.
I know I'm above average. Everyone says that, right?
Yeah,
Except
right.
conservative Lake Wobegon are all above average intelligence.
But we're so interested in the next thing that we're going to say. And I know this is part of my job, right? That I have to keep the show moving and going, and I know it's part of my job. But it's practicing hearing everything that you're saying, and then, but and suspending what I want to do next, so that we don't miss the point of what you're trying to say, which is what I'm trying to do right now. And it's so hard because it should be leading me, what you just said should be leading me to another question, which it does ultimately, right? Which, and it makes me want to go, well, Bill, why does this have to be such a stinking struggle? And I know it's because ultimately I'm selfish and I want to get my point in. But probably the key to the whole Rogerian process, honestly, is this fundamental point that did you really hear what the other person said? And that you can put it back to them in a way that they now know that you really did understand what they said.
Yeah. And by the way, to that point, and I feel bad answering what you're saying because I wish we could like turn like mic drop, end the conversation, like let's leave it there so people can just listen to what you just said. But I know we have more time. So, what's really interesting about that is that therapy, so he mentioned the Rogerian process, and, Carl Rogers, who we're talking about, like sort of the guy who wrote about this basic idea, like how do you do therapy essentially? And in therapy, you ask a patient a question. Yeah, as a therapist, you're going to learn from it, but really you're asking it so that they can learn from it, so the patient can get insights for themselves. So when they answer the question to the therapist, like literally the therapist shouldn't say anything in a way. They're not supposed to give advice per se. Like the idea is to get them talking. It's the Socratic method. And so when you talk to your stakeholders, you're asking them questions to get their insights, to get them talking. And so your answers, your responses, if you're not actively listening, not only are you probably not really listening, which is bad, but also the point is to get them talking and thinking. That's really the goal, just like in therapy, just like for Socrates. So there's a whole bunch of reasons you got to listen carefully, and then on top of all of that, yeah, you're gonna understand better yourself too. But that's like a tertiary goal. It really is to get their insight, to get them to understand.
Mm. Yeah, and sadly we're out of time. But I just want to just say this. I'd love to have your response back on it. Is as I'm asking you the questions, I'm learning too.
Yeah,
That's the part that's missed. And I can't learn if I don't listen. So we miss out on an opportunity, at least the way I'm thinking about it. Maybe I'm thinking about it wrong. Correct me if I am. But as I think about it, it's like, well, my learning comes from the questions I ask and the responses that you give me. But I can't learn anything if I'm not really listening.
yeah. And what that is, by the way, it's fast thinking. When you're not listening, you're a fast thinking response, and boom, let me give you an answer to that. It's the same problem. We
Mm.
all suffer from it. We're all constantly doing it to each other, whether you're the stakeholder or you're the whisperer. But as the whisperer, if you can tone that down, then everything will work better. Yes, you will learn, and hopefully the stakeholder will learn from these conversations.
Yeah, this has been fun. I've enjoyed. It went so fast. It always
It
does.
is.
Things go so fast. Tell people how they can reach you if they would like you to speak, if they have more questions. What's the best way they can learn more and maybe get a hold of you if they need to?
Yeah, you can always find me on my website, billshander.com. And of course, I'm also on LinkedIn. So look me up there. I'd love to connect.
Awesome. I will put his website on the blog notes that I write every week, the show notes, and I'll put those down as well. And I'll even put down his LinkedIn profile so that you can reach out to him through LinkedIn. Just let him know you heard him on the show. I'm sure that will make it a little easier on him too, as well. Bill, thank you so much for being on. It's been a pleasure being here. Stay with me, would you please? Folks, it's the show. You know what I say to you every week. You're in control of three things: your attitude, your effort, and your resiliency. The fact of the matter is life doesn't give us what we want. Sometimes our circumstances aren't what we chose, but you still have control over your attitude. Take control of it. That's within your power, and it's your choice. So choose a positive attitude today. You know what? Your effort is tied to your excellence. We all don't have the same amount of energy in the tank on any given day, but what you do have, be excellent with it. Again, that's your choice. How excellent will you be with what you have? And you know what? We all get punched in the gut and punched in the teeth and get knocked down, but it's up to us to get back up again. And we need you to get back up. Why? Because you're worth it, and we want you on the team. I'll be back next week with another great guest, another great book. It's automatically another great show. It's the easiest job in the world. You had a lot of choices. You chose us. I appreciate you doing that. Give us a thumbs up on YouTube. Wherever you're listening to the show, give us a 5-star review. I would be really grateful if you would do that. And so would my guest, by the way. As I say to you all over the world, you know what that is. Ciao, everyone.